topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
Hi everyone, it's Arthi with Light Up Your Life, and it's Friday and it's June the 4th, and I cannot believe it's already June, as many of you probably cannot even see. And I know that we are entering a new period. Many of you ventured out and feel like there is some sense of quote unquote normalcy. I also want to remind you to stay humble for those of you who are struggling with some anxiety and reintegrating back, and to just be cognizant of your feelings. As always, our goal is always to remind you to stay true to your feelings, to always be authentic, and to give yourself permission to feel it all. Because I always remind you, the grief that you may have felt this year will still transcend time. And so just always pay attention to how you feel. And when you're not feeling like you want to do something out in the world, then make sure you pay attention to those feelings and always, always take time for yourself. I am so excited for today's conversation and our guest, Genevieve Piturro, the name that I love because it's so Italian. And I'm so excited to have her today because she is going to talk to us about purpose and finding meaning. Genevieve and I had an awesome conversation a few weeks ago to see if she'd like to be on the show. And when she talked to me about purpose and passion and what that looks like in her own life and what she has chosen to do in terms of igniting the passion in others. So our title today is Finding Your Purpose, Ignite the Passion in You. So Genevieve is actually someone who has been a career switcher, which I have always encouraged many of us to look at what fuels our light. And so Genevieve has been a marketing executive, has done numerous amounts of work in the business field, and she had a passion that was ignited that she will share with us, the experience of meeting one child that completely transformed her life, as she will share. And with that experience, she founded a program, a nonprofit organization called the Pajama Program. She is also an international speaker. And Genevieve has numerous speaking engagements where she goes around and is known internationally. She's been on the Oprah show. She's also been on Hallmark's live program with her Home and Family and various other avenues. Genevieve's main message that she had shared with me now is really to keep fueling passion and purpose in others' lives. So when she said that she would be on the show, guess who was so excited? And in addition, she is an author, and I got my copy last week, and I was up last night reading as much as I could and throughout the last week, and it's such a beautiful journey of simplicity and elegance, and I just can't wait for her to explore and us to explore some of those topics that come up in the book. So without further ado, I welcome Genevieve to our show today.
Hi, good morning, Artie.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. It's so nice to be with you again.
Yes. Genevieve, I just want to start by saying I might get some teary-eyedness today because I was reading through your book, and even though you shared a little bit, and we decided to wait till you came on the show to talk about that life-altering moment for you. When I was reading your book about this moment, it fueled my own passion, which of course mine has come through building legacy through this organization that I've also founded. And I am so excited about this story today for you to share with everyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share it. I think this is a time we all want to hear each other's stories, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Genevieve, can you start at the beginning of life for you and just talk about just start us off by sharing, kind of your timeline and how you have gotten to where you are and whatever you feel like you want to share with us.
Sure. Okay, I'll start early. My dad came off the boat from Italy. So thanks for appreciating my name. As a kid, I didn't like Genevieve because nobody could say it. But as an adult, I love it. And, the Italian version is Genoveffa, very Italian, and goes with Piturro. But I usually use the American version, Genevieve. So he came off the boat, age 15 with his dad. His parents, he was an only child, wanted him to have the American, opportunity. So he got older in mid-20s. He met my mom and they got married and had 4 kids. And I'm the first one. And it was a very, as you can imagine, traditional Italian family, a very traditional home. And I know that although my dad came to America for an education and to bring his children up getting an education, I know that they also expected me to get married and have kids, grandchildren for them. And as the firstborn, I always knew that, but I had a different plan for myself in mind. And it started when I would just crawl out of my bed at like 12, 13 and watch TV shows. And when I found Mary Tyler Moore and her character of Mary Richards, oh my gosh, that was me. That was what I wanted. And I just knew from an early age, I wanted to conquer a man's world. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I wanted to be in an exciting career. And of course, she had a great wardrobe and she had a best friend that was so cool and an apartment. And that's where I was headed. So it took a while for my parents to understand, and I don't know that they did for quite a long time, but I wanted to be that single girl. And I was that person in New York, not in Minneapolis, but I was doing marketing in the TV world. And I loved it. I really did. I loved the fast pace and the energy and the excitement and having an apartment and, having some money all my own that I could, travel. And I traveled for business. So it looked like from the outside and also from me, from my view, that was, I was on the road to success. And 12 years in, I found myself in my pretty little apartment, just, cleaning up whatever I was doing. And I heard a voice, and RT came from here, which I realized in a moment, which was very strange because I, used to hearing all these chattering voices. We all do, right? From here. But it stopped me because it wasn't from here. It was like it came from inside me. It wasn't my voice, but it was me. And it asked me quietly, if this is the next 30 years of your life, is this enough? And it was clear, low voice. And it shocked me, as I think it would shock anybody. And I immediately knew the answer was no. And like a ton of bricks, it crashed down on me saying, what am I doing? What am I doing this for? Who is it helping? Does it make me feel really good or just excited and, excited about things I could buy and do and the success? And one of the things that I'd always felt was that my parents expected me to have a family and children. And I said, maybe I did miss a boat there. And not having my own children could be the reason that this question was asked of me, and I'm alone here. And I started to think about things. And what came to my mind were these children who I'd heard about in the news. And we all read these stories about these people who mistreat children and they find the children in just a terrible way. and they take them to emergency shelters, and the police take them, and the social workers. And I thought maybe I could find where these children are and somehow contribute to comforting them. So I started calling police stations and asking where these children are brought. And this was all pre 9/11 in New York. And you could do what I did, and I could call a shelter and tell them I was a nice person and ask them if I could come and read to the children. And they didn't hesitate, really. They thought sounded like a nice person, and they invited me in. Can't do that now, post 9/11. But the universe has a way of helping things to work out. So I went and I started reading to children. At the same time, I'd met a man who was special. Now I was in my mid to late 30s, and I remained single, but I knew it could be different with him. So here I am contemplating how to bring children into my life, and I'm reading to these kids, and I'm in my suit, my business suit. I have no idea what to expect. There wasn't even a place for me to sit. There were little chairs, and there was a rug in this room that they brought me to. So I sat on the floor with my bag of books, and they brought some children in, about a dozen. And oh, Artie, my heart stopped. There were just these precious, eyes, and I could see some of them been crying, and what they were wearing just upset me because their clothes were tight or soiled. I knew, just like we read, that they were in harm's way hours ago, and they were so afraid and not knowing where they were, where they were going, and where the adults were, if some of them were there with them and just getting some counseling, I found out later. But it was a mix of these children, and they came and they sat on the floor with me, and I started reading stories. And it was about 6, 7 o'clock. And so it was silent. I just read the stories, and they came in, they took the children back to this other room. And this happened, I went 1-2 times a week, and other shelters too. And the same type of thing, the same quiet children, the same circumstance. And I that was the most grounded I had ever felt. The longest I had ever sat in silence, the longest I had ever been in the presence of these such vulnerable children. And there was just this invisible connection I felt. And one night I followed where they were taking this group of children to go to sleep. And when I peered in, it was so sad to me, because there were a couple of couches and futons, 2 or sometimes children helped up onto one surface. They were huddled. They didn't have anything to change into. Some were crying. And in that moment, all these memories of my mom and how she put the 4 of us kids to sleep just, bombarded me of the laughing and the stories. And she'd make up stories, and she'd, tuck us in tightly and give us snacks. And we'd always want her to stay a little longer and tell us another story. And of course, we had pajamas to change into. So as I'm staring at this scene that's just heartbreaking, I have these memories that I'm downloading. And as the adults nudged me back to the door to exit, I just turned and I asked one of them if I could bring pajamas next week. And she thought it was a lovely idea. So all week, I couldn't wait to find an excuse to leave the office and go and shop, because I didn't want anyone to be left out. I didn't know what ages or which children would be there. So I had tons and tons of pajamas. And I went back, and after the story time, I told the kids that I had a special surprise for them. And I started to give each of them a pair of pajamas, and then they went to the other room to go to sleep. But one little girl wouldn't take them. And she just kept shaking her head, no, no, no. And she was frightened, and I didn't know why. And I didn't want to pressure her, but I wanted her to have a pair of pajamas. So she watched me give them to the rest of the children, and I tried one more time to give her the pair that I had put on over my shoulder for her. And I tried to show her how they were pink, and she had pink in her shirt, and her pigtails were lopsided, and her clothes didn't fit her. And I was just so sad. And I tried to have her touch them, how soft they'd be. And she just looked at me and she whispered, "What are pajamas?" And in that moment, everything in my mind went blank. And I just looked at her, and I at least I knew not to cry, because I didn't want her to think she made me cry or that she did something wrong. She was already so frightened. And I actually explained pajamas to this little girl. And they took the pajamas, she put on, and she turned and gave me this little smile, and that was it. I was done. The corporate thing meant nothing. It literally was an instant that I found, everything was erased that had come before, and I became obsessed. And that's the story of a powerful moment.
Oh my gosh, what a humble moment for you to even realize, for you to even pay attention, because there's so much noise. You were talking about the chatter in our minds. And in your book, you talk about heart center, right? Like, how do we speak to our heart center? And for you, you brought up the throat. And I always talk about the chakras and the throat chakra, and listening to our heart chakra and our throat. What does it all mean? And for you to have taken this moment and seized it is amazing to me.
I never knew in that moment. I knew it meant a major change for me, but I could never have imagined right then the impact of my obsession and the power of so many who, when I would tell that story, it was as if I was the little girl, and they heard it as if I was channeling the little girl, and they felt the same thing I felt in that moment. And that's a beautiful, amazing, remarkable thing to watch happen over the years.
Yeah, totally. You've used the word obsession. So I actually, in my mind right now, because I am very much obsessed too with my passion. So like, can you talk about obsession and passion now that when that moment happened for you, that ignition, right? You can call that igniting the light with this little girl who humbled you to this finding. Can you share with us the trajectory then of like what happened with this experience of obsession and passion now coming through?
Sure. I call it an obsession because it really did. It blindsided me, but it also blinded me. It worked out, and I think you have to be. I'm a jump, leap before I look person. And not everyone is. And I would have never guessed that I would be capable of erasing or having everything that I had worked so hard erased by a moment or in a moment. But all I could think about was that little girl and all those children, and how many more are there. And as I brought pajamas every place, I'd find the same situations. And my mind kept saying, how many? This is just New York. Oh my goodness. And when I got brave enough to ask questions about the need, I was flooded with requests. And it was just the idea that these children had such fear and such trauma at such a young age that going to sleep must have scared them, because what happens in the dark? Still as adults, I think if we're going through something that's difficult, it's scary at night. It's all the demons come up, the fear of having a bad dream. So I just thought, my goodness, how could they manage without having their mom or their dad or their grandparent or a loving adult with them at their bedside and there in the morning to ease any fear, any pain, anything that happened to them. They had no one that they could trust who was there. And that's the part I realized was what was hurting me. And I think it's what hurts people. It's not about the pajamas. It's about everything that means when that loving person brings you a pair of pajamas, you change in that whole scenario of trust and bonding that is just, represented, at least it was represented by pajamas to me in that moment.
Yeah. Yes, because you talk about human connection. I think you were saying like that is a big key ingredient for you when you talk about fueling your passion, fueling your desires, that a big part of your mission is the fact that this is about connectivity.
Yes.
You know?
And I say it's taken, we celebrated 20 years for Pajama Program, 20 years of good nights, for good days,
Oh,
and
that's
more than
awesome.
7 million new pajamas and new books to children across the U.S. and Puerto Rico and even abroad. But
Mhm.
it is, I found over the years, telling that story was an amazing connector because of the emotion that's attached to it and the simplest need and that small niche that I think made everyone feel like I could do something. I could make tiny change. I could give a pair of new pajamas and a storybook. And it just resonated with people. And that session, and you know, I write about it in the book, that was the good part about my not being able to keep my mouth shut. I had to tell everybody what happened in that story because I needed help. I needed, you know, that list of needs pajamas that I had handwritten was growing by the hour, and I needed help. So I had to tell that story all day, every day. But also, and I'm very honest in the book about all the other things in my life that I didn't pay attention to, my career, finances. You know, I had credit cards. Wow, I could buy pajamas. I have credit cards. Oh, you know, I can go part-time. I can, you know, just do a couple of projects here and there. But I had a mortgage and I had just met, as I said, a really great guy. And it came time for me to say early on to him, I might not be that career girl that you think I am, because I'm having a little change of heart here. And I knew his response was going to be really important to me. And his response was, go for it. So even though we got married and he had said that, I really did take advantage. And, you know, I give more examples in my book that I can even say, but that obsession is good and bad, but I didn't know another way. And you know, I'm in awe of people, and I coach people. I'm a personal strategist, and that's, you know, that's one of the first things we talk about. You have to be prepared, and if you're not prepared, you have to be prepared to not be prepared.
Yes, that's so true. I think when I hear you talking, it's a lot about showing yourself self-compassion while you're fueling and igniting, you know, when you take on a mission that is so dear to your heart. That how do you still take care of, and you did mention in your book the idea behind, and you said it, finances, your primary relationships, your secondary relationships, and even when it comes down to your own self-care with your physical, your mental, your spiritual being, how do you take care of it? And it's true, you're right. Sometimes your obsession, there's a delicate balance that we have to all find.
Yeah, it took me a long time. And, you know, my husband, now we've been married 20 years, but he still teases me. I'm better. I mean, he's much more spiritual. Well, he was. Now I'm catching up, but I'm not near how spiritual he is. But he started me meditating, and, you know, I laughed at that. You know, oh, really? That's going to help me here. I've got to get money. I've got to get to these kids. But, you know, he taught me that the universe is our partner. And as anybody who has started his or her own business knows, there are synchronistic things that happen. There are unseen forces. That commitment that you have and that focus that you have attracts, you know, miracles and what you need at the right time.
That is such a profound statement, and it's so true because, you know, Genevieve, when I share my own story, I'm not someone who was a business savvy, finance savvy, and I just remind people that when you do find your purpose, and you mentioned this in your book, the stars do align because you have taken that leap of faith or whatever you want to call it, and then you jump in. The fear is there. You acknowledge the fear, but you still jump in. And that I think is what you're saying. Like you were leaving this you were basically leaving behind all of the things you thought you wanted in your lifetime. Everything that had been built up for you as you dreamed of this Mary Tyler Moore and the idea behind. You were leaving an identity behind is what it sounds like, which is like big
That's right.
grief and loss cycle too, I imagine.
That's really well put. I was leaving the identity I had of myself, for myself, and that others did. I talk a lot about it's not easy to change your life on other people, because other people are invested in you being this way that they are used to and that they like and that they can depend on. And it's, I talk about the naysayers when I was going to do all this. And you have to have your support team. I call them cheerleaders, because there are surprisingly people who you know and who you think will be happy for you, who are going to really question, and not always nicely, why you're doing this, as if it's really affecting them. And to them, it is affecting their status quo, what they like, everything the way they are. And it rocks other people's worlds too. And again, I didn't realize.
Yes, and you did talk about naysayers, and when I was reading, you mentioned this friendship that you had, and when you went out, and you really when you were gauging, how do I do this? Should I do this? When you had that questioning of, should I take this on, this pajama program to start this non, and then when you shared your experience of how in that moment you were saddened because you didn't get the support you were looking for.
Yeah, it was a real punch in the gut. And I learned that you really have to go to the people that really love you. And for me, it was my new husband, my mother, my father, my family, and know that they had my back, even if they had questions. I mean, my dad grilled me, but I knew where it was coming from. Whereas my friend, I don't know if she was really concerned for me or if she just thought it was a frivolous idea. So that was the difference between, my dad and comments from this woman. So it really is important to have those that you trust and who trust you. My mom has always said, I don't know how you'll do it, but I know you'll find a way. And that's all I needed to hear from her.
Yes. When we look for our parentals to kind of, or a parental being, or someone in that, grandfather, grandparents, our familiar, when they give us some support or some little, it almost propels that forward for us. Yes, yep. Totally.
Yeah.
Genevieve, when we talk about purpose, I think, a lot of folks just look at the media and they see, oh my gosh, this person's so successful. And we never describe and discuss struggles. So could you share the struggle, like some of the struggles you have had to get you to where you are, and what would it have looked like if you didn't do that, didn't have that struggle? Like, what would have changed for you?
Right. Well, I think I can mention some struggles, but I think that's what I think that's why the people that I mentor and help strategize their decisions with can trust me, because I've been there. I've been down very dark roads of fear, financial, difficulties, marital difficulties that I brought on. All these things I brought on with the way I decided to go about it, and just jump in and just be focused solely on this obsession. And it was everything, and I couldn't sleep, and so I was getting sick. So a lot of that is what entrepreneurs feel, and it's overwhelming, and some people handle it better than others. I came out the other side. I wouldn't have changed a thing, because now I can relate to other people, and I can promise them, if I can do it, if I can get through it, you can. And I have some tricks and some tips, and I'm there every step of the way with them. So it did help. But I mentioned a few. I mean, financial, I just wanted to spend every penny and worry about bills later, because I had set up these times to go to these children. And, my husband expected a partner and somebody to be there and do some of the things he liked and have a conversation about something other than oh my goodness, what am I going to do next? And it was difficult. It was difficult. I brought on a lot of, anxiety in our early years. And, I lost some friends who didn't get it. And I spent a lot of time alone on my computer, doing everything by myself. And it was just, it was scary. It was scary because that list was growing and I didn't know where I would get the money. I didn't know how to turn it into something that was legal. And I did. We all do. We don't know, as I think it's Winnie the Pooh says, you don't know how strong you are, right? There's the saying, until you have to be strong. And we're all capable of that. We all find out how creative we are. And we all find out, you can do it. You can find a way, and people will show up for you. People want to help.
That's so true. You're right. Once you share a story that you, like you said, evokes emotion, which this story does, the word, like, even though there's a picture, that illustration in the back of the book, I mean, when you were describing this little girl, like you can almost picture what that moment looked like when her life changed as well as yours.
Yeah. Well, that picture is because over the years, even though I told that story every day, all day, the picture of her over time was just, getting lighter and lighter. And I was desperate to remember her the way I had the day after I met her. And so just a few years ago, I asked my niece in Chicago, who is an artist, Nicole, I give her credit in the book. I said to her, if she knew my story, I said, if I describe her with as much detail as I possibly can to you on the phone, can you sketch what I tell you? And she said, I'll do my best. So we spent time on the phone, and I told her everything I could remember. And I tried to insert all the emotions I thought she was feeling to see if Nicole could capture it. And she said, I'm going to mail you what I have. And when I opened it, I saw that little girl. I just saw her. And it just, it went right to my heart. And I just stared at it for what felt like, hours. And the first time I showed it at our Pajama Program fundraiser, I put it on the big screen. And one of our supporters was in the book, David. He yelled out, "Let's call her Hope." Oh. So that's why her name is Hope, because I don't know what her name is.
And hope, what hope means. I mean, isn't that a big part of what your program stands for?
Yes. And I had never thought of it until that moment, so many years later, when that's what he yelled up from his seat. And, everything has a way of being tied together. It's amazing. And I do think, back to the topic that you're starting our show with, it is when you're on purpose that things work out miraculously, that things are tied together, that we bond. And I always say, even I thought at the beginning, the power of one, look what one person can do. People like Oprah and Deepak Chopra and Gandhi and, Mandela, and one person has this power to change the world. But in 20 years, and people even said it, about me. And I'm like, no, I'm just doing this. You're all helping me. And what I realize is it's not the power of one, it's the power of one another that moves mountains and changes people. And that's one of the biggest lessons in my book, in the heart of the matter, at the end of every chapter, because I can't tell you, and I think all of the people I just mentioned would agree that yes, I had an idea, but could never have really changed anything alone.
You remind all of us that visionaries, the ones that you mentioned, visionaries and people who accomplish things, they also have a team. Sometimes they're a silent team, and sometimes they're a very active team that we all see. That's so true. And again, you're reminding everyone that when you have a purpose and a mission, things do start to fall together. Genevieve, you talk a lot about the universe in your book and like paying attention. So now, we talk a little bit about spirituality, because you did say that your husband was really the one who brought spirituality, but can you kind of share the trajectory of spirituality and what role it's played in this whole
Yes,
gamut for
sure.
you?
Sure. When you start something new, there are a lot of sleepless nights because you don't know where what you need is going to come from. And you think you're responsible to work 24/7 because it's up to you 100% and you have to keep pushing. But, my husband taught me if you make the commitment, and let me lean over and show you, this has been on my desk for 25 years. He said there's power in commitment. And the first thing he did was show me this poem, and I framed it because there is, whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now, because all acts of initiative and creation come together to support you. And it's that commitment and that focus that attracts these unforeseen forces to work with you, and human forces show up. And meditation is a part of my life every single day, and he taught me that. Vision boards, I'm looking at mine now. Oprah was on my vision board, and my husband sat me down in the park many times and told me to close my eyes and what would be the one thing that could really change things when I was struggling. And it was always like, if I could get on the Oprah show, I did. So there's proof, even though we are nervous about it, and I still get nervous about it and doing all these new things. But there is trust, and there's patience, and there's a time to push, and there's a time to stop and receive, and above all, there's got to be time for fun.
Yes, fun. I remember when we did talk, you had just gotten back from the pool. So do you have, like, Mr. Rogers always had a way that he started off his morning. This wonderful, I love Mr. Rogers. I just love him so much because he has this wonderful giving spirit of his power of his show. But then he had rituals for himself, and
He's
did have a way of Yes, and he did take care of himself. So Genevieve, can you share with our audience, how do you take care of yourself when you are doing so much of fueling and igniting for others?
I do swim laps most mornings, and I meditate every morning, rarely skip a time. I get up very early, very, very early, because that's the quiet time. And I need, even though I'm an A-type personality, I need to ground myself in that early morning quiet time and have enough time to do the things I just mentioned, to swim laps, to meditate, to eat, and to sit with my own, my own plan for the day before I jump in. So that's what I do in the morning. And I call my mom every night, especially because it really started every single night because of the pandemic. She's a senior. She lives in independent living facility. And it's been difficult, as anyone with a senior living in a residence knows. We haven't had time together, and only now we're starting to on a regular basis. And it's been, I can't imagine. She's been strong. She has a lot of faith, but I needed as much for her as for me to connect with her every single night. So that's been over a year now, my evening ritual, no matter what I'm doing.
Yes, and I think it's important to give those. I mean, we all have to have gifts that we give ourselves, and that's gift of time. So we do have to find a way to do that, to fuel, and like you said, to make sure we're fueling our mind, body, and spirit as well. So Genevieve, talking about COVID, can you tell us about the book authorship and what part, how did you have the vision for this book? Where did it come in that COVID played a role? Because I know it was published just last year. So can you share that experience? Because I can imagine there were like a bunch of like halt stops in this process for you too, which does happen with authorship. I just want to remind our viewers and listeners, there's always, yeah.
Well, this date was set by the publishers a couple of years ago. So at the time the date was set, of course, everything was fine. And after I'd been founder and executive of Pajama Program for all these years, a couple of years ago, I went to our board and said, speaking and telling the story is my favorite part of this. And the desk work is not. And I feel like I could contribute to our growth and future success if I can keep telling the story and inspire people to find their purpose and show them and share with them how purpose changes everything. And I want to write a book. So we hired a great executive director to take over for me. She's an attorney, so she knows all that stuff that I don't know. And I'm happy doing the speaking. So in the pandemic, live speaking things stopped, and my book was still set to be published in August. And I said, well, there's reason for this. And I think we've all seen that going inward was a very big part of this process for us, and really taking a look at our choices, our lives, why we follow the paths we did, and what's important moving forward. And purpose kept coming up, and I kept saying, I know, because I can tell you what happens when you're on purpose. And if this is an opportunity for you to either make this shift or bring in that purpose and passion on your back burner because you're waiting for the perfect time to do it, let's talk about doing it now. I can help you. I want to support you. So I did the virtual master classes and spoke virtually instead of in person, but there's nothing like, the energy of live. Yes. But you have to be creative, and so I was trying to be creative. So I did that, and the book came out, and I'm doing everything humanly and with the universe as my partner to find creative ways to talk about it. And I just won this past weekend the inspiration category of the National Indie Awards for Excellence in Books. So that's great. And Amazon, it's a bestseller. So it proves that when we have to make it work, and we live by our heart's direction, and we rely on each other, and we share our stories, good and bad, we share our fears, and we lend our support, that mysterious, piece of the universe puts something right there when we need it, and gives us that extra push when we feel like we've exhausted everything in a trying time.
Yeah. Yes, you're so right. You did mention in your book, like you aren't someone who just loved writing so much, but you decided to do this authorship. So can you share the experience for anyone who feels like they really would love to write a book, but they don't feel like they always have the writing skills, or what would you say to them?
Yeah, one of the master classes I taught was one I wrote that I called "So You Want to Write a Book." Well, it was my first one, and so this is true. It's not really a memoir, but it is true. It's my journey, and a lot of people are writing about their journey, which is great because we need to share our stories. For me, it was hard because of the nature of the subjects. It was hard to find a way to share what the children were going through, just a little bit, so that the reader understood my obsession or why I'm talking about the heart so much. So it was hard. I could write it all down like facts, but my husband, the spiritual one, would always say to me, "You're writing from your head. Write this from your heart." And then it would make me cry, and then it would hurt, and then I would have to remember all these things, and then I have to figure out how to write it so it was enough of a balance of emotion, but also sharing lessons and showing what came before and what came after. So the trick is to write from the heart. Sounds easy when you're writing your own story, but it's the only way we connect. It's the only way that humans connect. We can hear each other's words, we can speak, but unless what you're saying and what you're doing is heartfelt, the other person's not going to feel it. And feeling it is what makes that connection.
That's so true. With all literature, right? Nonfiction, fiction, you have to feel the words. You're absolutely 100% right. It's just like a movie where it's anything with feeling. You're right. You have to literally have that desire to keep going, to dig a little bit more, to keep picking it up, to go. And it is that evocation of feeling. You're absolutely 100%. I couldn't have said it better. So what's your 5-year plan? Not easy. Genevieve, what do you see? What do you see going forward? What's your vision for, like, if I asked you a 5-year game plan, what would you like to see happen?
Definitely the live speaking in person. It's always live, but in person, I miss that, and I think we all do. But when you are trying to share a story, saying it into a laptop or into a camera is not the same as standing in front of a live audience and then meeting people after who will, are so excited to share their story, their feelings, and there's always the follow-up conversations. I can't wait for that. I have a couple of live gigs that are confirmed for October. I am so looking forward to that. Signing books in person. I mean, it's just, I sign them on book plates, and once in a while I have a friend who will say, can you sign the book? But there's that interaction, and in this pandemic, we've been wearing masks, and I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think we were meant to look each other in the eyes. That's missing. We were in such a hurry, and we could hear, we could read lips, but in wearing masks, you have to look at each other in the eye. It helps you to hear. It really does. And
so true.
I think that was no coincidence.
You're 100%. I agree with you. I work with kids on the side, and I just have to tell you, when we would talk about working on face recognition, and we would talk about, okay, look at what's happening in those eyes, look at how they're squinting, look at right here in the crevices, what's happening. And I mean, 100%, you're absolutely right about how it was a slow down, stop, and halt. And for your book to be released in this period just reminds us of passion and purpose is a big part of why this pandemic did happen. For the universe is asking us, what is your mission? What is your purpose? And I think we're becoming humble to knowing, when you share your story, that when it feels like the sky's the limit, it's really not.
Right.
I mean, in terms of like reaching, it's limitless.
We can do anything. And, if you want to sing and you think, oh, my purpose, my passion is really to sing, but I can't sing, I'm an accountant. I say there's a way to slide that purpose and passion into your life. Take a couple of singing lessons, join a choir, join something, just an hour a week of giving yourself that gift, instead of saying it's on the back burner and being depressed that you can't sing, or there's never going to go anywhere, or you can't make any money from it. And if you bring that, even for an hour, into your life, that joy, that passion, that what speaks to you, what fills you up, you find that it not only changes you that week, you moving forward, what you have to look forward to, but it changes the attitude of everyone around you. Don't you think they feel your joy, your change? And it's just, until you do it, it's hard for some people to imagine. But I promise you, it's true.
Thank you, Genevieve. Thank you so much for your time. Where can everybody find you?
Well, my website's GenevievePiturro.com. And they can find me there. My books everywhere books are sold. Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas. Pajama Program, you can learn about it at pajamaprogram.org. And, please contact me with any questions. If you want to share something, I would love to know, what you love to do, and if you've done it yet, or if you're going to do it soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Genevieve, so much.
Thank you, Artie.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Light Up Your Life. As we had Genevieve remind us that purpose and passion are the ignition to life, and it leads us to have a joyful way of living. She also reminded us to always include fun, which I always say to you, what does fun mean to you? Keep it simple, but then also simplicity comes in whatever you make of it. So everyone enjoy your weekend, and please always find your authentic true self and know that that is the way to our whole being. See y'all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.